Welcome to another episode in Profiles in Leadership Interviews. I'm Steve Anderson, your host, and I want to thank VGM for sponsoring this interview. Today we have a great guest, Michelle Collie. Dr. Michelle Collie graduated with her Bachelor of Physiotherapy from the University of Otago in New Zealand in 1994. This was followed by her Advanced Master's and Doctorate at MGH, Boston, and becoming a board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist. In 2003, Michelle acquired Performance Physical Therapy, a practice with less than 20 employees. Today, Michelle serves as the CEO and Performance has 13 clinics in Rhode Island and Massachusetts and over 160 employees. Michelle serves as the PPS PR and Marketing Committee Chair. Welcome, Michelle. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Steve.
So start with, I'm curious, why leave beautiful New Zealand and come to the United States? How did your journey get here?
I didn't plan on coming here. This was really a stopover.
Okay.
So 20-something years ago, there was a shortage of physical therapists in the United States. Recruiters would come to New Zealand and recruit us to come over, do the visa paperwork, and the plan was that I came to Rhode Island, to a hospital there, basically gave them a 1-year commitment, and then I planned to travel on to London, travel the world before heading back to New Zealand.
Okay.
And that was 23
So
years
you never
ago.
got past
So I
the
never,
Northeast.
I never left Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, well that's great. So you've had phenomenal growth since you purchased this practice. So how would you describe that winning formula? How do you get from 20 employees to 160 in a fairly short amount of time?
It's a good question, and it can be complicated or simple. How did we get there? I think it's a lot to do with the people we have and constantly striving to provide the opportunities for the people that we had. I think when I first took over Performance Physical Therapy, I wanted to have a place that really gave great care, but also the physical therapists loved being there and working. And I wanted to create a culture that a PT didn't feel like they needed to go out and start their own practice.
Okay.
So right from the start, I think we automatically had a very coaching sort of methodology of leadership, really trying to develop people so they could continue to grow and evolve. But then of course with that I had to create more opportunities for them.
Right.
So as time went by, I would have a clinician saying, okay, I want to be a clinic director.
Right.
So we would go, okay, where shall we do it? And from there we've evolved. And I think too with the changes in healthcare, the more significant amount of growth has happened in the last 3 to 4 years. So that is a combination of doing what we need to do for the changing healthcare environment, but again, also doing what we need to create the opportunities for our people to grow and evolve.
Okay, and I think I heard that you were actually an employee of the practice before you purchased it, is that right?
I was. I was an employee and was serving as the clinic director in the practice, and the original owner, he had opened it in '99, came to me when we had about 16 employees, and he said, Michelle, I'm planning to sell. I want out of the private practice game. And he actually had a private equity firm wanting to come in and purchase at that time. And they said, but they will only buy it if you will sign a non-compete. And I said, well, tell me about the non-compete.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll give you $1,000 to sign a non-compete, which basically says you can't work anywhere for many, many miles, basically for the rest of your life.
Right.
And I looked at him and I went home and I was like, $1,000?
Yeah, that doesn't seem fair.
So I went to him and I said, I'm not going to sign it. It's not worth it. So he said, do you want to buy it? And I said, well, sure. And I think the reason I said sure was because I was 8 months pregnant, so I was a little crazy.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't actually have any money and I had no clue about business. And so it was a seller finance deal and also partly using SBA financing. And we turned the deal around pretty quickly, and I do remember sitting around a table with the attorneys signing away, and the attorneys looking at me and being like, we have never done a deal like this with someone who was this pregnant. And so that's when I became the owner.
Wow, and so you started out, you had to take some time away, I would assume, soon after that?
It was a crazy time.
Yeah. And you just must have had good staff to keep it going for a while.
Yeah, it was in the day where the practice was doing well.
Yeah.
My husband's self-employed as well, so between the both of us, there was a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I didn't sleep very much for those first few years. That was my first pregnancy, my first child. It's a little bit of a blur, but you do what you have to do.
Yeah, well, the private equity firm did their homework. They knew who's going to keep him from being successful, huh? That's great. So when you hire a new professional PT, what is it that you're looking for to join your practice?
We really look for cultural fit. That's the biggest thing. It really is about the people who fit our culture, the people who are passionate. Sometimes I look for people who are PT geeks, like they want to be advocates, they want to grow, they want to learn, they want to work really hard. We work hard and we also have a lot of fun. So it so much is about the cultural fit. We love having students. And we do bring on a lot of students as new hires.
Okay.
The reason liking it, because it allows them time to be in our clinic to really figure out if they truly want to be with us.
So is that where most of your hires come from, as a student?
I would say a lot come from students. It means we can make
They
sure
know what
they're a
they're
good
getting
fit,
into,
and they know
right?
what they're getting into.
Yeah,
so yes, culture is a big part. Obviously, we want them to be clinically sound, but we do a lot of mentoring, a lot of professional development. We partner with Evidence in Motion, put a lot through residency, so we can always deal with the clinical part, but the culture part is the most important.
So you talk about culture. How would you describe that culture, and how do you grow it and maintain it?
It's definitely a challenge for a growing company, and I think we've had to work harder and harder. When you have a company of 20 to 30 people, the culture just happens. It's sort of simple, and as that company has grown, we've found we've needed to be much more structured in the kinds of events and the kinds of messaging that we do, and driving the dressing up for Halloween, or driving this is what we do in the community, and even the atmosphere in the atmosphere in the clinic. So constantly actually pushing that culture to ensure it stays similar throughout the different clinics. Each clinic will have its own individual clinic, just naturally based on the people, but overall there's a sort of similar culture and a similar theme throughout the whole practice.
And so do you oversee the whole organization, I would assume then? So do you spend time in each of those clinics, or do you work out of a central office?
We recently went into a centralized office for our administrative services, which for a physical therapist feels strange.
Yeah.
February I'm suddenly going to work for the first time ever, and there's no patients around. But it's actually proven to be great, because we've all become much more efficient in our positions.
Right.
I've made lots of mistakes, so I'll go through times of spending too much time in a clinic, and which suddenly means people are relying on me for answers rather than their clinic directors, and I'll go for times when I step back. So I think it really depends on the needs of the clinic. My goal is I say to my staff, my goal is really to get the best out of people and make sure everyone's happy. So I treat each clinic a little bit differently depending on the staff there, the leadership there, what their needs are. The thing I've been finding most helpful lately is really scheduling lunches, where I go in, I take lunch in, I sit down, have lunch with everyone, and they've all learnt now that I'm actually not going with an agenda. I say I'm not here for anything, I'm just here to say, how's everything going?
So each of the clinics then has a director.
Each has a clinic director.
Okay, and then that person manages that staff basically, and then those directors then report to you, so to speak.
Yeah, we've just regionalised, so each of the clinic directors has a regional executive. We've sort of had to flip over earlier this year because.
So I'm intrigued by that. So how many? So you have a regional director, and they have how many directors underneath them?
Each of them have three to four clinic directors.
And do they are they responsible for clinic 2, or just all of those clinics?
They're actually split, and again, this is how we've grown, or sort of organically. Each regional director, we have 4 regional directors. Each of them, approximately 50% is dedicated to overseeing their clinic directors, their region. The other 50% is actually doing something more on a global scale. So one is more compliance and setting the initiatives and staying up on compliance and setting that agenda company-wide. Another is professional development and clinical standards. Another is outside services. So each of them has their regional part, but then they also have something more globally.
So when you're a regional director in your system, then you would be out of patient care then?
Most of the time. They'll go in and do some for coverage and mentoring and teaching. They're all board certified clinical specialists. They're all like excellent, well-respected clinicians.
Right.
So yeah, they'll fill in, but they certainly don't carry a caseload of patients.
Yeah. And how do they deal with that? I mean, we've all been in that position, I think, not all, but you and I have and others, in the sense where you work hard to become a good PT, you get your credentials, you get your OCS or whatever it is, and now you're going to come out of patient care. Sometimes it's hard to give up.
It's really hard to give up.
Yeah.
And some of them do. My job is to challenge them all the time and ask them questions, and some of them will get in the clinic more or less, but it's really about challenging them, what's the best use of their time, and maybe they delegate and get some of their clinic directors to do more of the things that they're working on, so it frees them up to do some patient care, so that we give them all the autonomy to make sure that they're being successful in their roles and they've got the opportunity to do a little more patient care if they want to. But we've sort of found over time, and I found this, is I love treating, and I really used to pride myself on being a decent, good physical therapist, but now I feel like I having a much larger effect on so many more patients.
Yeah, and I felt that way. I've kind of felt like I've had two really great careers.
Yeah, exactly.
So very differently. So you mentioned mentoring. So what do you mean by mentoring, or what is your approach to mentoring with your staff and the development?
A couple of things. There's sort of probably two different roads for that. One is the very clinical, and that would be your newer physical therapist when they come in and they're like, I want to be the best PT and I want to learn this. And yes, it's pretty straightforward at the end of the day to teach the basics of how to manipulate or dry needle or which exercises, but our mentoring, we really try and get into the clinical decision making, the communication, the softer skills, how you communicate empathy, those kinds of things. That's one track, but we find that as the clinicians get to a certain level, they start to realize that there's a whole lot more to managing themselves and managing their patients. So we have a leadership track. We have a 6-month in-house leadership program that we've developed that is not about management, it's really about developing yourself as a leader.
Skills. So, and is that taught by people within your company, or do you bring people in from outside?
We would like to bring people in from the outside, and we'll bring in special guests more because obviously our staff think anyone from the outside is much smarter than any of us. And so we'll do it for that. But a lot of it, we set the agenda, and we really do most of the teaching. Myself and one of my other regional execs has done a lot of coaching, been certified in coaching, so we can coaching into helping people be better leaders and the different components of that.
That's great. I mean, I really commend you for that, because my experience has been that there's not a lot of PT companies or PT groups that are doing that. I mean, there's a lot of clinical training and there's a lot of emphasis on that side, but I believe too that if we develop the leadership skills, they become better PTs. Yeah, and it's really something that I personally think is just as important as the clinical side. So,
No, I completely agree, and I wish that we could help our newer graduates understand that earlier on, or even before they graduate, that learning about how to manage yourself and your strengths and how to get the best out of other people, and again it just makes you a better physical therapist or manager, whatever road you take.
I've heard this a lot of times. New professionals will say, well, I don't want to be a leader, I just want to treat patients. And I say, no, I can't think of a more perfect example of leadership when you're one-on-one with a patient. I mean, you have to be a leader to get them to work with you and improve. So it's all about leadership. Yeah, I agree. So I'm intrigued by, could you build this company in New Zealand? I mean, you've built this, you have a private practice, you've built this, it's been around, it's got a great reputation, people love working for you. Could you reproduce it in New Zealand?
There's not enough people.
Yeah?
Yeah. New Zealand's little. New Zealand, the whole of New Zealand is like the size, land-wise, the size of probably California, but we have like 3.5 million people.
Okay, well let's say it's downscale then. Let's say you had 3 clinics. You have one in Queenstown, you got one in your hometown, you've got,
Queenstown.
Oh, you're from Queenstown.
Yeah, great. Could you recreate it? I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, as long as you're passionate about something, as long as you put the right people in the right places and you work hard and you're strategic and you communicate it, yeah, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking earlier about Lost in Translation. So I was in Queenstown once with my daughter and my wife, and we went to rent mountain bikes, go on a little mountain bike trip, and the guy at the mountain bike shop, my daughter said, because she's not an experienced cyclist, and she said, "Are there a lot of hills?" And the guy said, "No, just undulating," is what he said. And so we go on this thing and we're up and down. It's like, oh my gosh, you know the hills around Queenstown, right?
Yeah, they're mountains.
Oh my gosh. And so we said, there's a difference in perspective here, because we ran into another group and we told them that we were, American tourists, and she wasn't really experienced. And he goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "I've been training for this ride for 2 years." So it was quite the deal. So.
Well, the nice thing about New Zealand is overall, the attitude is that we call ourselves physiotherapists. Obviously, it is PT, it is physio first.
Yeah.
You hurt your back, there's a sports injury, you go to your physio.
Right. Do you ever see that being the norm here?
Do I ever see it? One day.
Yeah.
But I think
we're getting there.
We're
but I agree with you. I live in Seattle, and so we're close to Canada. And when you go skiing in Canada, that's what you hear Canadians say all the time. "Oh, I hurt my knee. I got to go see my physio."
Go see my physio.
Yeah, that's the first thing they say. And I don't think most people in the U.S. are there yet.
No, they're not. But it's come a long way.
It has come a long way. Yes. The one other thing I have to say about New Zealand is I'm still recovering from that van ride on Skipper's Canyon Road. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary. Did you bungee jump while you were in there?
My daughter did. I did not.
It's one of the most spectacular places in the world, though.
But the way they drive those vans with these, my gosh, these cliffs right 2 feet off the edge of the road is like, oh man. Anyway, what are the biggest challenges for you in a private practice today? So when you get up, when you look at your week ahead of you and you're saying, okay, here's what we got to do, what do you think are your biggest challenges?
People.
Yeah?
People. There's lots of challenges obviously there with reimbursement and contracting and referrals and the kinds of patients. But at the end of the day, I kind of think those are more opportunities, and we have to advocate and we have to do all the right things. The biggest challenges for me are making sure that we have an environment that our clinicians and our administrative staff are all happy and doing the best job. And with a growing company, when you have more and more people,
So you see it as a constant work in progress?
It's a constant work in progress. And I constantly make mistakes, so there's this constant having to try and remedy the mistakes I make and learn from them.
And what's one of your biggest mistakes that you learned from?
Biggest mistakes that I learned from? There's not sure where to start. I mean, there's the obvious mistakes, such as putting people in positions they shouldn't be in, or opening a clinic in the wrong place. But I think over the years, most of my mistakes have come from not truly listening to the people that I'm working with, and having to really now sit down and truly actively listen to people, whether it's a physician or whether it's a patient or whether it's a colleague, and really listen, hear what they're saying, hear what they understand, and helping them get to where they want to be with asking questions and getting to the why. So I know that's kind of a wishy-washy.
No, it's not at all. In fact, I think what we talked about this earlier with someone else is that it's such an undervalued or underappreciated skill of leadership, is listening. And we hear it once in a while, you need to be a good listener or whatever, but to be good at it, it takes practice and listening. A lot of times we listen just to look for what we can say next.
Just so we can say something.
Yeah, and so to really listen to what someone is really important to them. And then sometimes the other thing I think that we don't do a very good job of, which to me I think we should appreciate too, is sometimes as the leader just being able to say, I don't know. That's a good thing. Let me think about that, or let me do some research and I'll get back to you. We don't always have to, come up with the answer when questions are asked or whatever. So
it's frustrating because I think a lot of the time we feel like we do have the answers, or we feel like we should have the answers. But I think even now I had someone just email me the other day, a good therapist in one of our clinics, and emailed me like, oh, I want to meet so I can figure out the next opportunities for me at Performance Physical Therapy. And normally I'm like, yes, I'll meet with you. But then I'm like, well, first of all, why aren't you speaking to your clinic director? And second of all, I'm not going to tell you what to do. All I'm going to do is sit there and ask you questions, because I could tell you exactly what I think you should do, but that's not what it is. It's me sitting down and just saying, well, what do you want to do? And why, and how, and
see, that's another perfect, really good point, is I think another really great leadership skill is just to keep asking questions and keep asking questions. And it's just like you have kids, right? So it's like kids in the sense that if they can come up with it on their own, it sticks. If you tell them, it's like it's not theirs. And so you just have to ask enough questions to where they say, oh, maybe we'll do this. That's a good idea.
My leadership does get annoyed with me because they'll ask me a question and I'll always ask them back, well, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, I knew you would say that.
I know.
Well,
I've had people say that too. Don't ask me any more questions.
Stop asking me questions.
That's really interesting. So if you were starting this private practice today, what would you do differently?
I would have a lot more clarity in my strategic planning, really sitting down from the start and defining truly what the purpose is, the vision, what my mission and the values. Now, we have all those things now, but it's taken many, many years for me to truly understand how they can drive an organization and give clarity in the direction you're going and give clarity in the expectations that you then have for your staff that you work with.
That's interesting. So do you think growing up in New Zealand, has that been an advantage or disadvantage as far as how you run a business in the United States?
It's actually, it is an interesting question. I think it's been an advantage. First of all, I've got an accent and people like listening to people with an accent. No, really, that's true. Not really the main reason it's an advantage. I would say I grew up on a sheep farm in the middle of nowhere. We lived off the farm. My dad was a farmer. He worked really hard. He dropped out of school when he was 15. His parents died when he was at 20. He took over the family farm. My mother married him when she was 20 and had me a few months later. I mean, I grew up in a very out in the middle of nowhere. And I love the outdoors and all of that. I didn't particularly truly love it that much because I felt like I missed out on certain opportunities, which gave me a drive to get out of it and go to, I am going to be the first person in our family to go to university and do those things. But my father taught me a lot of lessons because he did leave school early and he had the family farm. He worked super, super hard and ended up actually becoming a very successful farmer. Ultimately, we moved to a different town. He got into the real estate business, but he really set an example of, hey, if you really work hard at something, you will get to a new place. And from there, when I came to America, I didn't plan on staying. When I took over the practice, obviously I was very pregnant, but I felt like I wasn't in my own community, so I didn't have to worry what people thought. I didn't know anyone. So I think that got rid of some of my fears that many newer people in business, or even women especially, have, that they think, oh, what if I do this? What are people going to think? I went to school here. I had none of that. I had nothing to lose as far as a reputation. And it also made me set up the business early on so that I wasn't doing every single thing, because right from the beginning I knew I wanted to spend time in New Zealand. So right from the start I was putting together spreadsheets and looking at the analytics so I could be in New Zealand and see straight away what was going on. And I talked to other practice owners and that would take them to a certain level before they would start doing that. But very early on, I was putting the analytics in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because that's got to be hard for parents to have their daughter move to a different country so far away. So you get back fairly often?
It's evolved over the years. I go back approximately every 2 years at this stage. My kids are at more of those middle school years, so it's a little harder. But we definitely get back there each 2 years. And and I have family that will come over every couple of years. So
That's good.
So, yeah.
That's good. So as a woman in business, do you feel that the challenges that you've had are different than your male counterparts, or what's your experience been as a woman business owner?
I do think the challenges are different. I'm not going to say they're more challenging or less challenging, and it's definitely an interesting subject. I do belong to a peer-to-peer group, and I am the only woman on it, and I definitely, I think in the past, tended to do a little bit more of the, for women it's harder because of A, B, and C, and a colleague, a group of them actually, turned around to me about 2 years ago and said, you know what, get over it, Michelle. Stop thinking yourself of having all these, woe is me, I'm a woman, I have so many more things to deal with. Like, move on from that and be comfortable with who you are. This isn't about, poor you, you're a woman. And at the time, I was quite taken back, and it was pretty brave of those men to do that.
Yeah,
but they're probably some of my closest, physical therapy friends now, and I appreciate them for having the courage to do that. And I think, part of it, it's more for women, it's more their ability to transition into leadership. Women don't want to raise their hand. Women feel like they have the imposter syndrome. They get worried what people think, and it's just the nature of who women are, but they do need to deal with that. I don't think personally, and other people may disagree with this, I don't think this is a problem with men in the society not treating women right. I think it's a lot of the time it is about women actually advocating and working with each other and helping each other be stronger. Women often aren't as supportive to each other as men do. You always hear about the old boys club, things like that. Yeah. But it's not the case. That's really about, women need to step up to the plate, and they need to gain the confidence, and they need to learn to get to know themselves and deal with those hurdles and be comfortable with who they are, and not try to be a man, just learn how to be comfortable with who you are. And it takes work, it takes courage, it takes getting the mentoring or the coaching or the reading or doing what you have to do to develop, and not playing victim to that role of being a woman. Instead, holding and being comfortable with who you are.
And I think it's interesting you brought up the imposter syndrome. I can say from experience that's not just women.
No, I know, and I hear that. It's everyone.
It's true. I mean, when I first took over my CEO job, oh my gosh, it's like, you think, what if they really know I don't know the answer to this or whatever. So I think that's pretty common. But I do think that we don't see in our profession, and maybe probably in society in general, as many women in leadership. And I know that it's probably sick of always hearing the question why no one knows the answer. But I think it's interesting to talk about, because especially we men too need to understand that, and why. Why do you think that is, or do you see it changing? Do you see it improving? I
do see it changing and evolving. I'll probably say the wrong things here, but here's the thing is, we have a lot of women that work at Performance Physical Therapy, and I talk very openly about, have a baby if you want to have a baby. It's when it comes to taking time off, take as much time as you want. If you're, and when it comes to returning to work, we'll make it work. And saying to the woman, you can have it all, because often women do want to have it all, but it doesn't mean you have to do it all at the same time. So if you want to step back from your leadership position and be home more with your kids for a while, do that, and that's fine. And when you want to come back into a leadership role, do that as well. I do think there is a challenge there, because women do, and I didn't really take time off when I had babies, but that's because I determined I'd be a better mother if I didn't. But again, that was my choice.
That was a personal choice.
It's my choice, So
you're making a mothering choice based on your personality and so on. Yeah, no, I think that's really true.
And I think it's helping women set up how to get themselves into leadership roles that work for them and their family, and helping society be comfortable with the different types of leadership and different types of roles.
I was talking to a woman physician recently who's got a very busy life, as you can imagine, and one of the things she said, when I'm away from my children, I feel less whole. And I said, I totally get that, and I'm wondering if men feel differently. And she said, well, what do you think? And I thought, oh gosh, here's a question, because I don't want to be judged by my
Of course.
question.
Yeah.
But I'll probably say I probably didn't feel that way. I mean, I had 3 young kids.
Yep.
I have a wonderful wife. Everything's great, but I think when I was at work, I'm not sure I could relate to that as much as probably a woman could. Now, you know, I didn't carry the kids, and I'm not their mother, but you know, I think those things are real. So we shouldn't.
It's real.
Yeah. So we shouldn't say, well, this is right and this is wrong. It's just different.
I agree. I completely agree, and I think that's right. Yes, when I'm away, I am thinking about my kids. I was actually with a colleague last night who was telling the story, and she's a woman, and she was at a conference, and it was the first time she'd been away from her 2 sons, and she felt so lonely in her hotel room that she ended up going and sleeping on the couch with the other people she was on the conference with, and they said, come and sleep in our room, because she's like, I just feel so lonely without them. But it was fine. It's like, you know what, that's okay, and you know, men and women, there are differences, and it's okay. There are differences.
That reminds me of a funny story. So my middle son was in college, and we went down to visit him in Southern Bay Area, California. And so I had to go home early for a meeting. And so my wife called me that night, and she goes, you're going to laugh at me. She goes, but this is the first time I've ever been in a hotel by myself. You know, and it shocked me. But it's true. I mean, she always had kids, or she always had a friend, or she always had me, and so it was just interesting that you know, that's an experience that, you know, you take for granted.
You do take for granted. Yeah. That's why when I come to these conferences and people laugh as well, I share a room with my other female colleagues, and people say, "What? You guys like 21?" And we're like, "We're kind of used to, you know,
That's what you like.
I don't want to hang out in a hotel room on my own."
So, what's the future for your company? Are you going to you know, you just keep going strong, you just keep growing? Are you comfortable where it's at? Or are you going to someday say, okay, I've done my thing and now I'm going back to New Zealand? Do you know?
You know, it could be any of the above. I certainly feel like there's still a lot of opportunity with our company, because we do have many great physical therapists who want to continue to evolve. I originally was 100% owner, and I am in a transition process where we now have 5 of my colleagues who each have a 5% equity. So we're looking at different ways to continue to maintain that integrity of what performance is, and looking at different models of what happens. I mean, I do love our profession, and you know, I love my role as a CEO, but that's not, you know, I've got to transition out of that soon at some stage. It doesn't define me, but I still would love to. I love the advocacy, being involved with the profession. I love helping other women, especially because I can relate to them. And,
that's great. So as we wind down here, we always ask our interviewees, if you have a pearl of wisdom relating to leadership, what would your pearl of wisdom be for our listeners?
You have to be healthy yourself. You've got to take care of yourself first, and you have to keep learning and keep figuring out how you can keep being a better leader, because your job as a leader is really to help other people grow and develop, and you have to continue to do that yourself so that you can help other people grow and develop. And you'll get a huge amount of satisfaction. There's nothing better to me than seeing, I've got kids now. They're now like, you know, adult men married with multiple kids, and you know, I still remember them when they were 18 coming on as students, and seeing them turn into leaders in their communities, in their life, and as professionals is, you know, it's amazing. And the more I can stand back and just be there to help in any way is, it's a really
well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, and thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I appreciate VGM Advantage for sponsoring this, and be sure and go on to the VGM Advantage website or my website, Orange.coaching website, and check out our whole gallery of video interviews and podcasts. So again, Michelle, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.